the supply chain is so essential for the entire U.S. Like this is actually a hit on national security.
As an industry, we have to keep the volume up to a level where attention and resources are focused on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, everybody, real quick before we get into today's episode. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to hit the subscribe and the like button. And if you want to be notified when new episodes are available, ring the bell. Helps us spread our message to a broader audience, and I genuinely appreciate your support of the channel. So let's roll into today's episode. Typically, I dig into people's backstories more than anything, curious about what made you get into logistics, what makes you tick, your hot takes on fraud and industry and whatever other side quests come up along the way, if you're game for that.
Yeah, of course.
I like to sort of frame this as the conference conversations that a lot of people don't get to have. Like if they don't meet someone in person, they just see them on a podcast or see them on a stage. And we all come away with questions of like, I wonder how that person got where they are or why they're doing what they're doing. So
yeah, exactly.
That's what kind of trying to bring.
Perfect. Yeah, that's awesome.
So welcome, intro spiel complete. Thanks for coming on today. Appreciate you being here, Danielle.
I know. I appreciate you having me on for sure. I love the hat, by the way. It's pretty stellar. I need one.
Oh yeah. That's my. I've got my olive drab one for when I'm being a little more subtle, but it doesn't come on camera as well.
Yeah, I like the neon. That's cool. I need one for myself. So next time you make another hat, ship it my way.
I can do that. I can do that. Well, these are interchangeable. They're little stick-ons. So it's a little patch. So if you want to put it on your bag, you can put it on a bag. And
that's cool.
It's a good plan.
But it needs to say the trucking cyber girl. But I'm also not really a cyber girl. But
well, you can fraud girl Fridays, right?
Yeah, fraud girl Fridays. Yeah.
I mean, fraud girl could be confusing when people see you for the first time if they don't know the context.
I know. Somebody was like, you should just be anti-fraud girl. I'm like, that doesn't sound as good. And then, of course, Scott Cornell's like, quit calling it fraud, call it cargo theft. I'm like, I can't be called the cargo theft girl. Like, that doesn't ring well either. So, fraud girl it is. Sorry.
I love it. So, before we get into fraud girl and cargo theft, I want to know, so you just barely switched roles, like within a month, is that correct?
Today's my first day, actually. Yeah.
Is it really? Well, hopefully you're not sneaking off to go do a podcast on day one here. I'm not going to get...
I'm good.
That comes with the director title. You get that prerogative, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So, yeah.
They know I do my own podcast, so they're used to it.
Nice. So that's... this is going to be a little bit of a change in kind of focus for you. Is that correct?
Yeah, kind of. So with My Care Portal, I was wearing a lot of hats, especially prior to being acquired. But partnership was one of them. Was probably my favorite part of it because basically it's just like being friends with people, talking tech. So basically I get to do all that fun stuff, but I don't have to do the sales piece, which I've been in sales since I have my own babysitting club. So I've always done sales. So it is weird not thinking revenue, but it's going to be fun as far as, building out how different like vetting platforms can talk to each other. Just what Genlogs has to offer is super cool. And to me, it's like the real source of, is this a real carrier or not? The past things of like, if they have an inspection, if they don't have an inspection, that means they're a bad guy. I mean, that's kind of been out the window, but if they're not cited by Genlogs, it's kind of the new way I feel like of thinking about it. So it's kind of cool to be part of the future. But yeah, roles changing a little bit. Like my mind shift has to change a bit, but I'm so excited. It's going to be really fun.
Well, congratulations. I saw that come across on the, the LinkedIn network newsflash, congratulate you on a new role. So I was excited for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited.
You'd been with My Carrier Portal for a long time, right?
Well, it's about 2.5 years. So not like super long, but yeah, I was part of them like prior to being acquired and really helped them, develop their product. I mean, I was a broker for 8 years prior to, and I was a user. So right when I got on board, like I'm talking day one, I walked in, I'm like, hey, you guys got to fix X, Y, and Z, because whenever I was a user, I needed to see this and this and this. And I always wanted this change. Right. And their dev team's just super great. And they would just like, sure, done. And it'd be done like the next day.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, they're great.
That's that right there is the perspective that people bring from when you've been on the operations side before you come into the product side or the platform side. It's so helpful to have that actual frontline knowledge, because a lot of times when we find, as you found as the, when you were a consumer of that product, it's a good product and it's built well, but it may not land on all of the operational points that you need. So it's really good I think to have people come in from industry and get involved on that side of things.
Yeah, no, I think it was great for the product. And then because I kind of became, quote unquote fraud girl, I had so many people reaching out to me with different cargo theft trends and stuff like that. So I was able to like get on calls with them and dissect exactly what's going on, and then use that same data on that carrier, multiple carriers that were committing thefts, and see, okay, if we were to build this in or that in, like, would that actually have stopped them? Would that have thrown up a red flag? Or a lot of times there already was red flags. So how can we make it where, like, as one of our customers, you see a red flag and you actually are like, hey, do not pass go, or how do I vet them further? So I've been real big on education. I mean, I think, you're like this as well, like educating as much as you can, because it's not a yes or no answer. And those who think it is don't know how to vet carriers. And there's a lot of gray area. And I think if you don't understand how to properly vet, you're limiting your capacity, especially right now when times get tougher and tougher. You're definitely going to limit your capacity, which is going to increase your rates, and you're not going to be as profitable, and it can shut down your business. So,
yeah, I think that's an important point. There's very little that's black and white when it comes to carrier vetting or the fraud prevention space in general. You have to get comfortable operating in that gray zone and figuring out, like, do we have the majority of the evidence pointing to this is a positive, or the majority of the evidence pointing to this is a negative? Because you're never going to really be definite until the load either gets delivered or disappears, right? I mean, that's the moment of truth where know, okay, this was a good call or this was a bad call. So
yeah, unfortunately, we're not sitting with the guys in the truck, so we really don't know ever until, like you said, product ends up wherever it ends up.
Right. Is that what drew you into the work there in fraud prevention, was having been on the broker side for a long time before that and seeing a lot of it and then saying, okay, this is enough is enough. I want to get into a role where I can kind of focus on this. How did that happen?
Honestly, I kind of fell into it. So as a broker, first I did postal as my very first, like, being a broker. And then after that, I did electrical wire and copper. So mainly high value freight. And so I had to become really good at carrier vetting. I had loads stolen and drivers held at gunpoint and all sorts of crazy stuff. So we had to get really creative. And even now to this day, the company that I was with is like really, really strict kind of on how they vet and stuff like that. So I learned a lot from my old owner. She's amazing. And then as we implemented my care portal, which was like the last 3 years of me being a broker, it was honestly a game changer. Like my checklist wasn't so long, and it took me, minutes instead of, maybe an hour to vet. So it changed kind of my whole world. So what ended up happening was I messaged, one of the other sales guys. His name is Mike. He's kind of the OG of MCP, and, was like, hey, you guys are awesome. You guys changed my world with this. And, I almost had a load stolen, but because you guys had this, it stopped it. And we just kind of kept talking. And then eventually he's like, hey, we got a sales gig, opening up. You want to come over? And I'm like, okay. So, and then as far as like speaking and educating and stuff like that, honestly, one of my other coworkers at the time, Meg Boaz, she threw me out like into the ocean, like, hey, head first, get on stage. You're talking in 5 minutes. And I'm like, if somebody has it on film, like, please always delete that, because I'm sure that was so embarrassing. But she kind of threw me in to be like, hey, you know what you're talking about. You've done this forever. And so go out there and talk. And then I just became more and more doing it, and then been labeled the fraud girl. And now it's like part of my identity, which is so funny. But yeah.
Nice. I can identify with the first speaking engagement. I didn't do a lot of public speaking or educating in an outward facing way before NMFTA, and within, I think it was a month and a half of joining at NMFTA, they were like, okay, we've got this gig we're sending you to. You're going to be speaking on a panel. I'm like, okay, I'm psyching myself up for it, and I get there, and I think the worst possible situation, maybe you feel differently, but for me, a small group is way worse than a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I got into this room, like we got up on the panel set up. There were like 10 people in the whole room.
Oh my gosh.
You know, it was just like one of those, okay,
You can hear
where are the
everything.
rest of them, right?
Yeah.
So,
Oh no.
but yeah, talk about getting thrown in the deep end. It was
Yeah.
interesting, but we roll with it, survive, right?
My first webinar was a nightmare. So first it was at a conference. She threw me up there. And then my first webinar was the very first one that MCP ever did. And my computer shut down mid webinar. And then my dog went ballistic. Like I could not get my dog to calm down, barking like directly in my ear. And it was just me. At the time, like we didn't really know what we were doing. So it was just me trying to figure this out. And everybody who was watching was like, what the heck is happening? It was awful, but we made it through, and I did, almost 2 years worth of webinars after that. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like if you have a few of those kinds of experiences, then nothing else can really rattle you, because you always have that comparison point where you're like, yeah, this isn't that bad.
Yeah,
I've
right.
seen worse.
Yeah, exactly.
So you said you've been in sales since you were 14. What was your sales role at 14? Was that the babysitting club, or was that like a first gig somewhere?
So Babysitting Club was actually a lot, like I think I was 12 when I started that thing. 14, my parents were actually in a repoing business, and so I would help kind of help them with that, which it was kind of like a weird, I would just go with them to sales. So my dad did, or my mom did that. My dad was in auto glass. So I did a lot of, going to the plants and talking to all these people with my parents and being able to, I mean, honestly, I was sales pitching at that age, which is funny. And then right after that became like a hostess, and then worked for, kind of places like that. And then ended up for a long time, right after high school, I was in a call center for a telecom company. So I sold like phone, internet, and TV. And I did that for 10 years and top salesman there. I loved it. It was so fun. And then ended up kind of having a girlfriend be like, hey, you want to make more money and come over to logistics? It's super fun. I'm like, okay. Not knowing that I wouldn't sleep ever and be on my phone 24 hours a day and not have a work-life balance. But, it was great. And so being a broker, it was so, like, to this day, I still miss it. People ask me all the time, and I mean, I don't miss waking up in the middle of the night to my customer screaming at me, and having a load stolen. That was always awful. But the hustle and bustle of it, and like finding a truck and building a relationship with the carrier, that was so fun. So, sometimes when I do like customer visits, I would hop up and be like, can I sell a load? And I'll hop on the phone. And
yeah, I think it's one of those things you either love or you don't really survive in. Right. I mean, I think brokerage sales, it's so fast paced, and it's so, your focus is in so many different places at the same time. Like, you have to just be able to keep a lot of balls in the air all the time and understand what's going on. Because obviously TMS's help and all of that, but there's so much of it that's either gut feel or knowing the lane, knowing carriers. You have to build that rapport. Like you said, relationship. The whole business is built on relationships.
Totally. I think everybody that is successful has at least a touch of ADHD, if not full blown ADHD, because being able to multitask and handle all the chaos, your mind has to think in tabs. That's how they got to think. Yeah. So, but it's fun. I think it helps those who are like, I'm ADHD. So for me, it was great because I got to do, my energy spikes got to happen. So
I'm immediately picturing a good friend of mine who has worked in logistics for a long time and functions at a speed with which most of us just can't keep up with. It's just got to be fast paced. I know, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about cargo theft, because I know you have to talk about cargo theft and freight fraud all day, every day. But
I love talking about it. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there, right? So obviously we've seen. If you've been, what was it, 10 years? That would have been 8 years.
8 years as a broker. So I've been in the industry almost 11 now.
Okay. So over that time, I mean, everybody's seen a shift in the trend, but over that time, what's your experience been personally from a vantage point of a broker of the fraud landscape over that time? And has that been kind of a constant increase, or have you seen certain inflection points?
Definitely a constant increase. So basically I would say prior to 2019, really 2020, to be honest. But prior to that, I mean, basically we were just seeing straight theft. Like, my drivers, because it was hauling high value freight, they were having to, like, I was instructing them to drive the 250 miles before they stop, and make sure you back up to a, secure lot and things like that before you do anything, and don't park, just leave your truck anywhere on the weekends, and that type of straight theft conversations with drivers I was having to have all the time. And then we would see like the misspelling of an email and that type of kind of cyber things like that, or like, fraud things, I guess, like that, trying to be deceptive. And then after 2020, honestly, I think a lot of it is due to the culture shift. Everybody was at home. And honestly, I was posting and covering via email. And like before I was I was 2 phones, slinging freight. And then after, COVID being at home, I didn't even have phones at home. So I was just doing all via email. And so I think because of that, we lost a relationship. We were just booking and turning loads. And that's really where the strategic theft, or, theft by deception, came into play, and double brokering became rampant, and fictitious pickups and chameleon carriers, and, you name it, all the buzzwords we hear today. Sorry for my dog, but all the buzzwords that you hear today, kind of started, I would say, is really 2020, but 2022 is whenever it spiked up. I left in 23. So it was the week before I left, though. I got scammed. And honestly, like, I literally was, I'm not kidding. Like, I was so in depth on all my processes, and like, nothing ever happened to me. And this guy seemed so legit. I swear it was like targeted, because he's like, oh, we've never gotten this girl before. And they just put the best one out there because he sounded legit, and gave the information not too fast, not too slow. They were, rerouted the phone calls, and they hacked into FMCSA. That was right whenever that first happened. So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy the levels that they go through. And nowadays, like, just hearing from customers and stuff is like the cybersecurity part of it. And, not just because I'm on here plugging you, but the cybersecurity stuff of it is really the foundation of majority of the thefts out there, is how people are just very vulnerable, and they don't keep track of anything that they're doing cyber wise. And so it's leaving this gaping hole, and the bad guys are just totally taking advantage. So it's wild.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the work that we're doing, is a lot of it has been focused on that cybersecurity connection with fraud and all of that. But it's like you said, I mean, I've seen it operationally. I mean, I was on the operations side. Would have been late 2000 teens that I switched over, or mid 2000 teens, I guess, that I switched over to the technical side, but still involved in the daily operations to a certain respect. And it is, your teams can be doing all the right things with operational security. Mm-hmm. But if they get hit by somebody who's compromised another carrier or another broker in a way that they are legitimately in charge of that carrier's identity at that point, I mean, Your team there's not a lot you can do, like you've seen. Obviously, you just hit on that.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting, and something kind of important to say out there too is every vetting platform, everybody's getting hit with that. Whenever someone's in their email, they're honestly in everything. Like, think about your iPhone and having that tied to your email. And, once they're in there, they're doing 2FAs with their phone numbers. And I mean, it's definitely like a much more, it's a lot bigger than people think. And I think those that say that, oh, well, I have this and this is the answer and this will fix all, is not true. There's tech can do so much, and tech should be there to enable us. I mean, not enable us. Tech should be there to enhance us and make us faster, but it's not everything. There's still human things that you need to do, and picking up the phone and making a phone call to the FMCSA phone number. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've had customers be like, because I have this in my process, it saved me X amount. So that simple thing, and that can't be taken over really by tech, because hearing their voice and stuff like that, you got to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, we as an industry run the risk of trying to solve some of these kinds of process problems, or I don't want to call them culture problems. I don't think that's the right term, but human relationship problems with technology. And there, like you said, there's limits to that. We can do a lot with technology, and we can do a lot with new tools, and a lot more with the existing tools, I think, if they're more efficiently utilized. But at a certain point, that's the message that I always land on too. It's like, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and verify this. Like, whether it's you call FMCSA or you're calling a trusted contact at a company you've dealt with before, and it's like, hey, is this person actually with you? Because how many times has that been the case where it's a new contact at this company, right?
Right. Exactly. And I think also we've kind of as an industry made the mistake of letting shippers kind of dictate so much for us. And I think instead of looking at like that, we need to be refocusing and looking at it as a, hey, I should be the shipper's or wait, hold on. I can't even talk, the shipper's expert, subject matter expert on cargo theft. And so you should be the one that's saying like, hey, what are your processes? What do you guys do at your facility? And then what information can I give you that you'll actually use and vet when they're there? Because really they're boots on the ground. And we have, every broker has always said from day one, like, if only the shipper would have checked this. Well, why are we not having those conversations and building that type of relationship with shippers? To me, that's kind of like an area where us as an industry, especially as a broker, has really failed.
I think that as an industry, I would say it's wider than the brokers. I mean, I think that the fleets feel the same thing where, shippers don't necessarily follow through on the things that fleets would like to see. But then that begs the question, like, have you asked? Have you required? Have you verified? Have you followed up? And we sometimes fall into the trap of just being like, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And we see it in the cybersecurity world where a lot of times smaller companies don't feel like they have any pull with their vendors. They just sort of have to accept the terms. But once you start asking the questions and once you start, determining who you're picking and choosing to do business with based on the answers to those terms, then, if enough people start doing that, you do start to see change. And I think we see some of that in the transportation industry as well.
Yeah, I think we're getting there. And I think education is why we're getting there. I think finally we're at the point where we're kind of all of us who are out there, cybersecurity or cargo theft wise, we're screaming the loudest and trying to get this out there. And, just me scrolling on LinkedIn, all day long, I see somebody talking about cargo theft. And I love that because it means we're finally talking about it. So hopefully there's enough exposure. So if you haven't already had that talk with your shippers, you should be, because they should be aware of it. If not, you should be the one teaching them.
Yeah, if your shipper's not aware of the cargo theft risk in today's world, I would question how much shipping they've done. It seems like it's pretty ubiquitous, and it's also obviously there's some stuff at the federal level that's now getting attention, and we're talking about TSA's got some pilot programs, and we're looking at some some higher level attention on the matter, and I think that's a positive. What do you see when you look at those proposed regulations or rulings on that type of stuff at the federal level?
Yeah, like the Corca bill, I cannot wait for Corca, especially if they actually do something with it. Like it's gonna stink if we're getting super excited and then it takes some years and years and years to implement anything, because then who knows where we'll be at that point. But that bill I'm super excited about. I think as an industry, or excuse me, as like the government's getting more involved in our industry, the good and bad. Like I'm a little bit of like, I don't want government getting into everything, but there's definitely a lot of things that we need their help on to fix. One thing being the registration, that was a nightmare, and even keeping up with, their business licenses, matching up with the FMCSA. I know Dale Prax always talks about wanting to have a TWIC card associated with drivers or company owners on carriers. I mean, there's some things that they can do. I mean, think about how strict it is just to file taxes. And, if we have all the information on people, I don't understand why we're not using that on the, transportation side of things. But I do think we're coming a long ways. We are educating them. And I think we as an industry need to keep pushing to them and say, hey, this is actually, you guys deemed us as essential during COVID. The supply chain is so essential for the entire US. Like, this is actually a hit on national security. And the fact that the Department of Defense is getting hit probably worse than anybody, which is super scary, especially right now with us being in war. I mean, that's like, who knows who's taking what. I mean, they're not even the initial process of signing up to become a Department of Defense, carrier. That's pretty stringent, but they don't do any monitoring after that. They have to have a SCAC code, and that's usually it. They don't check anything else. So they give a one truck show 30 loads. Why are you doing that? Who knows who they're double brokering that to? Who knows where that freight ends up? Who knows if that, you're moving a house of a Department of Secretary of Defense or whatever, and, they're bugging his house. Like, who knows what's happening? And that's what I think is super scary. And I'm hoping us screaming about that as in the transportation industry, we can be like, hey, this is a priority. And I think they're hearing us. Hopefully we'll see what happens. But
yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it's, you've got to, it's the old squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? We've got to, as an industry, we have to keep the volume up to a level where attention and resources are focused on the issue. Because we know we're losing, depending on which report you look at, it could be hundreds of millions of dollars to in the billions of dollars as a nation,
Right.
across industries because of freight fraud and cargo crime. And I know the identity portion you mentioned, they have SCACs and that's about it. But that's part of why we were tightening up the SCAC codes on,
Right.
for non-class 8 is exactly because of that. Because if you can get a SCAC code, then we need to make sure that the SCAC code is a verified identity piece in the puzzle as well. For those, those that don't go through the class 8 vetting. But I agree. I think there's an argument for stronger identity verification at the registration level.
Right.
I think that's pretty much everybody in the industry says that at this point.
Yeah. But even outside of registration, there's, most of it right now is the selling of MCs, which that's honestly hard to catch because by the time they could even, you could put all day long that we need a law saying that if you sell your MC, you actually report that. These guys aren't following laws. Like they could care less if a law is in place. You know what I mean? So I hear some people out there talking like, oh, if only we had this pass and that. I mean, that's not going to make a difference. But I think at least having something in place where we can go back and hold somebody accountable so that if, for instance, for me, if my take on this hot take is if I sell my company until it's actually registered underneath that new person, I hold all liability. So if there's a cargo theft that happens, that falls back on me. I can get sued. All that type of stuff is falling back on you. So I think if we were to have something in place like that, it would make drivers or small fleet carriers or whatever owner operators who are selling those MCs realize, oh, I don't want to be on the hook for this potentially bad guy, stealing all this freight. So kind of that type of mindset, I think we need to have it more as an industry, a little bit more scary, but also a lot more educational for small fleets. And I know you guys are really good on that too, because most of the time it's just these guys don't know what to do. So.
Yeah, I mean, historically, it wasn't like a critical component of your business plan, right? To plan around this, and it has become one. I was going to ask. I thought while you were talking about the stolen identities being used and the original owner of the MC number being held liable. One of the things that I have seen, and I've spoken to a number of different small carriers specifically who have had their identities compromised, have had their MC numbers stolen or used without their permission.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost impossible for them. I mean, it's a significant uphill fight. Maybe I can put it that way. For them to get their MC number cleared and get back into the broker networks. What do you see as an ideal there? I mean, I know there's a lot of moving parts, but it seems like in some way there should be a kind of an off-ramp for a carrier that's been blacklisted and it wasn't really the carrier. We don't really have a tool for that process.
What's scary is we also don't know 100% if they really were in on it or not,
Exactly.
That's what's hard. So that's why, when something happens, you are going to get blacklisted. You need to shut that one down. And then you start up another one, which is a whole nother ball game. And that's what the bad guys end up doing. But I think there are some vetting platforms out there that will, like, you can prove yourself, do facial recognition and do a bunch of things, and they will take down the bad marks on you. I know MCP was like that. If you prove all these things, they're like that. So I think there is a way to do it, but as an industry, we need to get better on that. But it's also a slippery slope. How do we know for sure this guy didn't take a bribe or as many dock workers as we know get bribes for like $100 here and they do it. For me, just to, hey, you won't even be held liable if you just say, hey, you had your credentials stolen. Nothing will ever come back on you. So
that's a strong argument. Yeah.
It's scary. So it's a hard thing to say. Obviously, I feel for those carriers that happens, but that's why having that strong cybersecurity health is so important and investing in your tech stack.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's where we're trying to come down on it. And I personally have taken kind of a crusade on this one of, I can't say it loud enough or often enough that, you know, even the basics. We just got to get the basics right
Mm-hmm.
to get people out of that. Like, there's so many people now that are just sitting wide open,
Right.
waiting for someone to take advantage of them, and they don't even realize it. You know, and
Yeah.
that's really the mission that we're on at NMFTA, and I'm on personally, is like, just do the basics. Just start with, you know, put MFA in place.
Yeah.
Use better passwords. You know, stop clicking on stuff.
Right. Stop clicking on
You know?
things. Just because it says you got an
Yeah.
Amazon order doesn't mean you actually have an Amazon
Right.
order.
Right. Yeah.
Go to the actual site and log in.